We're going to do a SWOT analysis of the teams in the Leinster Championship. We did the Munster one last week, and you can go onto the YouTube channel there and watch that back. Let us know what you think. So again, I'll get you to explain to people what is a SWOT analysis.
Yeah, no, it's, a lot of businesses would just do it to try and progress or identify problems, but S is the strengths, W is the weaknesses, O is the opportunities, and T is the threats. So when we went through Limerick, there weren't too many weaknesses, and potentially there weren't too many threats. But when you go through the rest of the kind of chase and pack, there's probably a couple of different facets to go into each area. We'd start off with Kilkenny, All-Ireland finalists last year, and their strengths. I would say, one of their main strengths is anyways that you have a fair idea, barring the last maybe 35-40 minutes of the 2019 All-Ireland final, and maybe a couple of appearances against Wexford. You have a fair idea what you're going to get most days, and they're going to perform to a level most days. And I'd say that definitely is a strength. They rarely throw in, a really, really off-colour performance when it's needed. So I would say that's definitely a strength. What are you looking at strengths? I'd say the form of Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen as well, and the potential for them to be leaders of this next generation of Kilkenny team, I'd say is a big strength too.
Would you include the All-Ireland final last year and the All-Ireland semi-final they had during COVID when they were 10 points up in Waterford and fell away? Would you
I said generally you have a fair idea what you're going to get on a given day. I don't think it was a complete collapse against Limerick last year. I think Limerick went through the gears, but I would say that's generally you have a fair idea. Like, you can't say the same about Galway, can't say the same about Cork, can't say the same about Waterford. There's a good few teams there that you can't say that about. You have a fair idea what you're going to get from them most days.
Yeah, and I also say one of the strengths is how dominant they are in Leinster. They've won, is it 3 in a row now, or
Four.
Is it 4 in a row now? So they've very much got the rest of the province under their heel, which is going to set them up for the All-Ireland semi-final, or it has done in recent years. And then they've come into it and they've performed. To be fair, in the All-Ireland semi-finals, they really have performed very well.
That's a strength as well, Shane. Being in Leinster is a strength. It's a massive strength.
And look, as a Leinster man, I suppose you're able to speak with a bit more authority on that. But I think the strength is, probably their performances in Leinster that sets them up for that run at the All-Ireland. They come in, they've probably had, a nice little break in sort of like, they have a tough game, a bit more of a manageable game. They can sort of rest players, they can use their squad a little bit. And then once they hit Croke Park, and by the way, they've already had a few games at Croke Park because of the way Leinster is. They hit Croke Park for an All-Ireland semi-final. They've given everyone a bit of game time. They've been able to rest lads if they've needed to. They've already got Croke Park experience that season. So emotionally, they should be in the right spot when they play an All-Ireland semi-final. They deliver. And then, to be fair, I would say that they've delivered what they can deliver in the last 2 All-Ireland semi-finals. They got really, really close in 2022. Could have won that game. Puck of a ball. Obviously, you see Limerick at the very end. They're kind of hanging on to some degree. And then last year, I think probably losing by 9 points, they still probably got as much as they could out of themselves in that performance. So they're delivering.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. When you look at weaknesses, I would definitely say, I don't know, midfield has been an interchangeable feast for the last 5 years, I'd say, nearly. You have no idea really who's going to be playing middle of the field, and it's so important nowadays. And I'm not just talking about lads getting up and down, just that kind of link with their defence, obviously the link with the attack as well, but been really defensively solid. Like Limerick, you have O'Donovan and O'Donoghue, they're as good defensively as they are going forward. They're just so good at plugging holes, so good at covering for defence. Kilkenny, you don't really know who's going to be playing midfield. It could be Conor Fogarty, it could be Adrian Mullen, it could be Cian Kenny, John Donnelly could be out around the middle of the field. It could be, Conor Brown's not involved in a minute. It could be him. Mikey Carey could be out around the middle of the field. They do not have a settled pair in there, and it's definitely, I would say, one area of big, big worry and a glaring weakness, I would say, in Kilkenny at the minute.
Okay. No, that is an interesting one. And finding midfield players is a tough one. It's, as tough a position as there is. And then also now with the way the middle area of the pitch is probably filled with up to 18 to 20 players, sometimes you can say, that midfielder didn't get into it. Well, he's surrounded by so much traffic. Whereas if you're a half back, there tends to be a bit of space to get on ball behind you. Not always, but there's a bit more handy ball to be won. The other thing I'd say is, right, they've had that underage success. They won the All-Ireland under-20 title a couple of years ago. But I just don't know if they've got obvious lads to step in as senior stars straight away. So I would say possibly the weakness is they're going to still be relying, obviously TJ Reid is still one of the best players in the country, but they're going to be relying on him again this year, and they're going to want to leave him on for 75 plus minutes. There isn't very obviously underage stars coming through. Now, at this stage, Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen, who've collected Young Hurler of the Year titles between them, they're totally established and they're brilliant players. But I just don't, like, have we seen, who's the next generation? There's no obvious next generation that's going to set the tone this year.
No, I would totally agree. Cody and Mullen are well established the last 3 or 4 years. I would say, as you were talking there, my point I was going to make, I would say, and maybe it's harsh, that there seems to be an absence of class coming through, or an absence of star power coming through. And that would be a big, big worry, because TJ is going out the door over the next couple of years. That's obviously a gaping hole that they're going to have to fill. Maybe Mullen or Cody will take on that mantle, but who's going to take on their mantle then? Are there obvious kind of, you know what I mean? Like, are there obvious players to come in there? I don't know if there are. You know, they won another 20 All-Ireland. Billy Drennan was probably the star turn in the final. You know, maybe hasn't developed into that senior star yet. Now, there's still plenty of time there. He was under 20 last year. There's still plenty of time. But there's no obvious class angle, shall we say. There's a lot of good players, but like when I was growing up, it was, you know, Richie Power was the next big thing. Cha Fitz was the next big thing. Richie Hogan was the next big thing. TJ burst on the scene nearly in even a Leinster Colleges final, All-Ireland Colleges final. He was the next big thing. Paddy Hogan was even around there. You had a couple of the Prendergast as well. That, you know, you had a lot of players that you're thinking they're the next big thing. You know, we're struggling probably to say that in Kilkenny at the minute. It's a different player nearly every month. Do you know what I mean? 1 month it's Billy Drennan, 1 month it's Harry Shine, next month it's somebody else. So I don't think there's any, you know, really, really obvious, real top end stars coming through at the minute. Now, that might be proven to be false in a couple of years, but at this moment in time, you'd say there's no lads waiting and primed to come into the senior team and make a big splash.
Yeah, so like, get your comments in. Are we right? Are we wrong? Do you agree, disagree? Joe Butler, with a fully fit Adrian Mullen, Kilkenny are a different force. That ability to score from 50 to 60 metres is a rare skill with all teams. Adrian has that ability for sure. I agree with that. Adrian McGrath says, Kilkenny's strength is belief that they're going to win, which sustains effort on the fringes when things are not going well. If belief drops and 1 or 2 drop work, you can go from 5 to 10 down in minutes. So opportunity then?
Well, the fact, as I mentioned about being in Leinster is a massive opportunity that Tip, Cork, Limerick, Waterford don't have that same opportunity. They have to basically, you know, kill to get to the position that Kilkenny have been in. So it is a glorious opportunity that, you know, if Kilkenny can get to a Leinster final, which you'd expect them to do, and if they're able to win a Leinster final, they're, you know, 140 minutes away from winning All Ireland. Do you know what I mean? That being in Leinster is a massive, massive opportunity that would say at the minute that a lot of other counties don't have that same luxury. So I would say that's a massive opportunity. It's also the fact that they're, you know, if Limerick are to win Munster as well and Kilkenny win Leinster, as they have the last couple of years, they're avoiding them until that final stage. Maybe they need to play them in a semi-final, maybe like they did in 19. But you would say it's an opportunity that's there. It's a matter of grasping it each year.
Do you know, you could nearly say for every Leinster team then their opportunity is that they are in Leinster, because it does lead, there are a couple of gaps there in terms of, like, if you're Dublin, you're like, okay, well, you know, and you could say the same for Wexford. Well, thank God we're not in Munster here, because we actually do, it's probably a 2-team shootout for that third position to get through. And if you're at the bottom end of it, you're like, okay, well, look, there's a couple of teams here that are going to be in the mix for getting relegated. We're not necessarily going to go down because of that. So is it a small bit of a cop-out if we choose that being in Leinster is your opportunity?
I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't use it for them all. I just think for a team like Kilkenny, like, it is like Limerick could be out of the championship before Kilkenny have to play them. Do you know what I mean? Like, Kilkenny could win an All Ireland without having to play Limerick, or Limerick could be out of competition. If they are out of competition, it's by virtue of the 4 teams in Munster knocking them out of competition. So they could be still standing on the other side when, would say, the 5 in Munster could have a hell of a lot taken out of each other, and the 3 that are left, potentially with Limerick gone, could sleepwalk into a semi-final or final against Kilkenny. So I wouldn't use it for all the teams. I just think with Kilkenny, you know, they're going to be in an All-Ireland quarter-final minimum by virtue of being in Leinster. You'd imagine anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll just very quickly give you their route through Leinster this year. Round 1, the 21st of April. That's going to be at home to Antrim. So that's a win. Next game out then is the 28th of April. That's away to Galway. That could go either way. It could be shadow boxing like we saw last year. Round 3 then is going to see them on the 11th away to Carlow. Look, let's call a spade a spade. That's going to be a win. Then they've got a trip to Dublin on the 18th. And then on the 26th of May, they've got Wexford at home. So it's balanced out really nicely. Tough game, relatively easy game. Use your squad. So look, let's get a comment in here from GA for Life. Such nonsense comments. Who've won the colleges, schools, All Ireland? Kilkenny will always have hurlers coming. How many people thought Mikey Butler would get Young Hurler of the Year? Probably no one. I'm guessing he's supposed to say. We will be fine. Okay, that's fair enough. But like when you go into these competitions, is it not like Kilkenny CBS go in and Kieran's go in and it's kind of take your pick from the Kilkenny under-20 team? So those teams are stacked.
Yeah, well, like people that are working in Kieran's or involved with Kieran's mightn't thank me for it, but some people in Kilkenny would suggest that Kieran's taking in as many players as they are from, a massive amount of clubs. It's nearly more like not a development squad, like an academy, or do you know what I mean? Everybody's going in there. That mightn't necessarily be a good thing, really. That's what people on the ground in Kilkenny.
It's great for Kieran.
Anecdotally tell me it's great for Kieran's and they're in another All-Ireland final, but it's not necessarily good for Kilkenny as a whole, shall we say, because all those All-Irelands that they've won and competing at that level, it definitely hasn't transferred across, you would say, to their minor teams in the last, 7-8 years are we talking? They haven't won a minor since 14, am I right in saying? Was it when John Walsh went to town on Sean Finn the last time he was seriously struggled in the game, I'd say. But it hasn't correlated to Kilkenny minor teams for the last good while, for whatever reason.
Okay, and then the threat for Kilkenny. Keep getting the comments in, folks.
The threat.
I'd say an injury to one key player. I'd say TJ Reid is out for whatever reason. You just wonder where they go from there.
You would say that's a big threat, even as regards who steps up and takes the frees. Like Owen Cody, I would say, is a brilliant player, but he's not a natural free taker. Did they play Billy Drennan mostly for the frees? I don't know. I don't know if they do. I don't think they can afford to be missing a big man like that. Saying that too, like I'd say I don't think they could afford to be missing like a Hugh Lawler or someone like that either. Like I'd say probably Hugh Lawler and TJ are two players that they and probably Edger Mullen that they cannot do without. Particularly, I would say probably Lawler and Reid in particular. Who would fill that gap at the edge of the square for Kilkenny, having a fella that can go toe to toe, and then you have TJ at the other end. I think even psychologically, if he was missing or had to go off in a game, it would have nearly that same effect as Henry going off back in the day.
Okay, Galway strength.
Well, like when you put their squad down on paper, you're kind of thinking, like, and just off the top of my head, Dottie Burke, Cottle Mannion, Pádraig Mannion, Tom Monaghan, Conor Cooney, David Burke, who has Ronan Glennon, Brian Kincannon. Kevin Cooney's injured at the minute, but he's still there. Joe Cooney, and you're still thinking there are 8 or 9 of definitely some of the better players in the country. They still have, and I haven't named a heap of talent there. Their squad is very, very strong. Throwing Keenan Fahy, Darragh Fahy in there as well, Éanna Murphy, Jack Grealish. Who else are we talking here? There's plenty more. Like on paper, you would say that they have one of the better squads that are out there.
Yeah, look, they do have a lot of talent, and yeah, so I don't think that's for question. Then the weakness, I would say, a potential weakness I talked about in the last week or two was, physically, are they going to be as strong as they have been in recent years? We've seen, like, when they're trying to bring through some of these new young players who are quite talented, the size profile is very, very different from the team that Micheál Donoghue and just afterwards had. So I'm just wondering if, Galway always like to be a team that's able to mix it up with you physically. If they try and do that this year, do they have the personnel suited to it? And if they're going to maintain some of the personnel who do give them that, are those players a little bit long in the tooth to play them all together? Something I would have said about Tipperary in recent years, playing too many of them together. So is the weakness that they might actually have to change style on the hoof a little bit, and maybe they are doing that, to be fair. But yeah, I just wonder, is that an issue?
Yeah, you've often said it. They're not the land of the giants anymore.
No.
Looking at the size profile, there's a lot more lads around 5'10" or 5'11" now. So I don't think they can play that same style maybe that they did in 2017 or 18. Their weakness for me would be an easy one. It's just unpredictability, that you just are not sure on a given day what you're going to get. With Donoghue, from 16 to 19, generally you knew every day what you were going to get out of Galway. I don't think there was a bad performance or a real up and down thrown in from 16 to 19. I know Dublin beat them in Parnell, but they didn't not show up that day. They still performed to 11. Dublin just performed much better on that day. Then under Shane O'Neill in 20, it was consistent enough. Then in 21, Dublin beat them in Croke Park. They were atrocious against Waterford for a half in Thurles. And it's been very, very up and down. I'm thinking the Leinster final in 22 was terrible against Kilkenny. There were times last year where they mixed, the brilliant with the, woeful, you'd have to say. So, and even already this year against Tip, switching off at different times in games, it's just you're not 100% sure what you're going to get on a given day with them. If it hits and they're on fire, they'll be very, very hard beaten by anybody. If they perform to the level they have at times, they could nearly be beaten by anybody.
Yeah, so the opportunity this year is that they've still got some of those key players who won it back in 2017. So David Burke is still there, Conor Cooney, Dahi Burke, you can name several other players. So they have all of those lads still there to help get them over the line in big days. I'm just also wondering, is this the year that Jason Flynn, and he's always shown that he's got quality, does he catch fire this year? He's 29, he's the perfect age. Will the team finally be named to make him the fulcrum of the attack? And he, along with Brian Kincannon, Conor Whelan, Evan Nyland, who's probably really laid down a marker this year, Conor Cooney, if he's starting, Kevin Cooney, if hopefully he's back fit and available. Do they have a little balance where that will all help them across the line, that combination of, right, there's a couple of talents and a couple of lads just coming to the boil while the older players are still able to offer something?
Yeah, I think Eamon O'Shea's influence is going to be fascinating there because, Lara and Jamie Callan would always say that he turned them kind of inside out and changed the way they played and made them kind of think a bit differently, and they both really flourished under him. It'd be fascinating to see if it does happen. Would it be a Jason Flynn, who has unbelievable potential, but it's kind of glimpses that we're seeing. It's not consistent brilliance that we're seeing. Maybe that will come out in him. Maybe Conor Whelan has been the fulcrum of their attack. Maybe they'll just, they've placed captaincy on his shoulders now as well. Maybe they'll just say, lads, we need to get him the ball as often as possible throughout a game and make him the fulcrum of the attack. There's an opportunity there, but the opportunity is also a bit, a potential weakness because they're relying on some of the same players that they've relied on that probably haven't consistently delivered. And, some people would say as well, and I see some of the comments coming in there, that, that in 2 years under Henry, did we learn much about Galway? They were able to go toe-to-toe with Limerick at times, and then they, didn't deliver in one Leinster final, probably half threw away a Leinster final last year, and they're kind of going into this year now. They have to, just going on to the threats here, they have to win a Leinster this year, or there is a threat that this is all over. For this team, and many of those like David Burke, Dottie Burke, Conor Cooney, Joseph Cooney, the clock is probably ticking on them, and there's a threat there this year that if they don't get silverware, that the chance may not be there for some of them again after 2024.
Yeah, and a couple of people have questioned, for example, Adrian McGrath here saying weakness, Henry Shefflin in charge, learning on the job. Look, he's done a lot of brilliant stuff, especially with Ballyhale, but yeah, people aren't going to be patient forever. On the threats of Galway, weren't we? So what are the threats with Galway?
The threat, and I think I briefly mentioned it, was that if they don't get silverware this year, or if they don't maximise what they have this year, it could be the end of the line for a few players. And I know Henry is signed for, or he's agreed for another couple of years, but I don't know, would the mood music change even more significantly were they not to get silverware this year? I thought they needed silverware the first year. They needed even more last year. It's actually non-negotiable this year. And it'll be interesting to see whether they're able to, deal with that pressure, because there's a they have to have a significant piece of tin in their locker at the end of this year, and that brings a fair bit of pressure with it.
Would a league title do anything?
I think it's unlikely, and I don't think so. Been honest with you, I don't think so, and I think it's very, very unlikely. But I wouldn't think it would suffice, really, considering a good cohort he's having in 17. Now, they did win the league. They won the All Ireland as well, obviously too. It definitely wouldn't do any harm if they were to win the league. Probably. Maybe that little bit more confidence, maybe to help them get over the line in Leinster. But would it be a massive, massive, massive plus if they had a league title at the end of the year and nothing else? Probably not.
Okay, just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. Also, we've got a couple of club fundraisers coming up. If you want us to do one for you, email events@ourgame.ie and we'll help get that set up for you. So, Michael, we'll move on then to Wexford. So, the strength of Wexford. What do you think?
Strengths. I suppose the fact that they still have the kernel of their team is probably still the backbone of that 2019 team. Matt O'Hanlon, Liam Oak, Diarmuid O'Keefe, Lee Chin, albeit I think he's going to miss the rest of the league with a hamstring injury. I think in a couple of years they're going to find it tough, but because I think there's, don't like use generational talents, but there's 5 or 6 players, Liam Ryan as well, that they're not going to be around on the scene forever. They're all still there now. You probably nearly go down through the whole spine of their team and you're thinking they're guys that are late 20s, maybe early 30s. They're all still on board at the minute, and they offer a huge experience, and they offer that they have that kind of winning experience as well from 2019. So I think still having all those players on board is huge, because I think when they go out the door, Wexford are probably set for a bit of a lull.
Richard Hogan says Wexford's strength, the sight of the black and amber jersey. Would you consider their playing style under Keith Rossiter this year, which you've talked about because you've been at a couple of their matches? Would you consider that a strength given the style they've been playing previously?
I would say it's definitely more positive anyway. And they have a lot of, would say, lighter kind of bodies, would say, younger fellas, would say the likes of Seamus Casey, the likes of Richie Lawler, Conor Hearn even as well. They're not big 6'2", 6'3" players, so they're quite mobile. They're playing that kind of a style. It's no coincidence that David Franks is involved and that they're not playing exactly the same as Ballygunner, but it's a similar kind of a style, and they're playing to their strengths. They're not playing with a sweeper generally. They nearly always have 2 players up and 2 players playing fairly deep. Definitely one playing really deep and the second player not too far away. So I definitely think it's a lot more positive, and they're probably playing to their strengths a good bit more than Conor McDonald standing on the edge of the square by himself and 2 or 3 kind of defenders around him and just launching a kind of a ball in, a kind of a hopeful ball in. Definitely think it's a good bit more positive this year so far.
I would say their weakness is just the injury concerns. Like you've kind of mentioned Lee Chin there. We haven't seen Conor McDonald, or certainly much of him just yet. Kevin Foley going off injured recently. That was early on in the game also. That's not ideal.
Liam Ryan, Rory O'Connor.
Have we seen Liam Oak, McGovern as well? And just the total concern over when Lee Chin isn't there, do they have that sort of powerhouse who can step in and win that ball in a 50-50 situation when you need it? So I'd say the injury, like Rory O'Connor, like if we could see him play a full 2 seasons in a row, I'm sure he'd have himself right in the tick for an All-Star. So it's just that whole thing, the opportunity for them.
Well, I think there's a load of kind of new, not necessarily new faces. They've all been exposed to senior intercounty, the vast majority of them under Dara Egan. Like Corey Byrne-Dunbar, this must be his 3rd year, I would say. Richie Lawler's been in around the scene as well. Conor Foley's been in around the scene too. I suppose there's an opportunity for those guys to turn into the new leaders of what's going to be the new Wexford in a couple of years. I'd say Shane Reck and Damien Reck as well. Like you kind of nearly think those boys have been around a hell of a long time. They're not around that long, but there's an opportunity for some of those players to be turn into the leaders of this team. And the fact that Keith Rossiter was with them, not the Rex obviously, but some of the younger fellas at under 20, and the fact that he was with Davy for those 5 years, when Davy was senior boss as well. There's a fair opportunity. There's a fair continuity here. There's a fair opportunity as well for the new faces to kind of step up and basically say that it's their time. And I think he's placed a lot of responsibility and faith in them, and they've justified it so far. So I would say that that's probably one of the main opportunities thus far, anyway.
A couple of threats. Number one is having lost to Westmeath, the manner. And it's not necessarily losing to Westmeath, because Westmeath have some fine hurlers and they've pushed a couple of teams close in recent years. But having lost from 17 points ahead, is there going to be a mental frailty on a big occasion when it's really put up to the team? Now, they've other credit in the bank, All-Ireland semi-final, winning Leinster, blah, blah, blah. They have credit in the bank, but there is that. And in the concern and threat, I would also put in there is Keith Rossiter would love to have played 5 to 10 games, including challenge matches at this stage, where he's got his full team out, Lee Chin, Rory O'Connor, Liam Ryan, so on and so forth. What opportunity will he have to have seen his full team melded together with his own playing style by the time it comes to the tough stuff? So I think that is a threat, moulding his team together.
Yeah, I've said that to you before.
And free taking here from Richard Hogan, actually.
Yeah, we'll come into the free taking in a second. Like, it's one thing having a list of boys to come back, but it's another thing having those boys match fit for the Leinster Championship. And a lot of them aren't going to be. Like, Matt O'Hanlon hasn't played a minute yet. I think he played against Laois in a challenge game a couple of weeks ago. Liam Ryan hasn't played a minute. Rory O'Connor hasn't played a minute. Joe O'Connor has played very, very little. Liam O, Dermot O'Keefe, like, it's great having them. And now you have Lee Chin on the back foot going into the championship probably as well. And little doubts hanging over that. So that's definitely a threat. And the free taking, you would have to say, is an issue as well, in that, well, Seamus Casey's probably going to take them for the next couple of games, but they're not where the elite teams are in terms of percentages as regards converting frees. And had they, were they more reliable, they probably would have had 2 points on the board against Clare rather than the one that they got from the draw.
Okay, Dublin. By the way, people keep getting your comments in. Let us know in terms of the SWOT analysis, any of the teams in Leinster. And if you missed the Munster one, the video's on YouTube, but go ahead and throw in any comments if you want to. Dublin then, strength.
From what I've seen so far, anyway, Brian Hayes is a big strength coming in, because there's enough kind of lads maybe not on the scene and doubts about different lads. He would definitely be one. I'd say Donica O'Doolig would be another one who you've seen plenty of. There's a decent crop. Dermot O'Doolig, sorry. It is like I don't know if I'll ever get
him and O'Donnell.
Donegal O'Donnell, and I don't know if I'll ever get my head around that, to be honest with you. There's a decent crop, and you know a bit more about it. There is a decent crop of younger players coming through, which is a strength. It's not as if there's not a nice bit of talent there. The issue probably is, and it's probably a weakness in itself as well, is that those guys are going to have to learn on the job, and they're going to be inexperienced. Like, what your strength is also a weakness, in that you've got talent coming through. They're probably going to be overexposed almost as well, and which I would probably view as a weakness too. But just like, what would you view? You're probably a bit closer to the scene than I am. What would you view as the strengths in Dublin?
Yeah, I do think there's plenty of hurlers and athleticism there. Like, I know Owen O'Donnell has obviously been tried in wing back, and he played full forward until he got injured after about 20 minutes against Galway. And because he seems to have had a nice little layoff now, when they bring him back in, I think they'll have settled their forward line at that stage. So he'll probably go back in full back. So you've therefore got a very seasoned goalkeeper in Sean Brennan with brilliant puckouts. Now, and obviously, the whole team was very poor against Limerick. But just if you go through the spine, you've got him as goalkeeper, you've got Owen O'Donnell as full back, you've got Chris Crummy as centre back. That's where it looks like they're going to play it. Then you've got Conor Burke, who'll probably drop from midfield and sort of sweep. Very, very competent player. You've got the pace of Brian Hayes going up through the centre. You've got Ronan Hayes, hopefully he can stay fully fit. Whether he plays inside or half forward, he's going to bring something to it. And then you've got Paul Crummy as your target man up at the full forward line. And there's a lot of good players who can play the other positions, out wide, the wings, corners, whatever it might be. So I do think that they've got a good spine, and they've got a couple of dynamic young players in O'Dooling and Brian Hayes. So, yeah, I actually think that would be their strength. Like you're saying, there's a bit of a decent spine to the team. A weakness,
Injuries anyway, definitely.
Injuries have definitely been a big problem. Their conversion rate, I mean, I watched them hit 16 wides against Galway. I watched them miss 3 very good goal chances. So are they clinical enough up at the top end of the pitch? And will the ball stick in the full forward line often enough? That's the big challenge. That's what's proven to be the weakness time and time again in recent times. And then another thing is, last year they were almost criticised for playing in Croke Park in the league games. This year they're gone the other way and they're playing in Parnell Park. And like I said to you coming into the Tipperary game, I don't think it'll suit them. I think Tipperary will beat them up in the tighter confines. And now they're going to continue playing their games in Parnell Park, and then they'll be thrown back into Croke Park at some stage. And will they be a fish out of water when they should be taking the Croke Park medicine now or getting used to it now? You know, like I was saying earlier.
That's an odd one. Yeah, that's an odd one now that they've flipped, particularly because results probably, like they got the big result against Wexford in Croke Park last year. So you'd imagine they'd be playing every game there if possible. Maybe it's not always available to them as their home venue.
Well, it's not available to the Dublin hurlers. I mean, I find that very, very surprising. Like, I'm sure Micheál Donoghue gets good sway. They're not going to tempt him in as manager and then tell him, by the way, you're going to have to play all your matches in Parnell Park. I don't care if you want Croke Park. And last year they gave it to him.
The only thing is, Shano, if Dublin are playing a standalone league fixture, shall we say, in Croke Park, the Dublin hurlers, like Croke Park would be operating at a loss, basically, because there are not going to be enough people coming through the gates. So that could be something to it as well.
Do they have enough time to sort of organise that and pair up matches?
They would have to be fair generally, and obviously they had that double header last weekend. But I'd be the same as you. Dublin are a mobile athletic team. I would say playing in Croke Park is a necessity for them.
Yeah, Travis Wheeler says strength for Dublin is having Micheál Donoghue as manager, shrewd and proven. Should still be Galway manager, and they would be better off. Okay, opportunity for Dublin. I would say the opportunity is the low expectation from absolutely everybody. So they could catch teams off guard this year, again, if they get everyone on the pitch.
Yeah, it's mad to think that they have an All-Ireland winning manager on the sideline, and I would say that the same as you there. I'd say expectations are pretty low, and even after taking a bit of a shellacking from Limerick, I'd say expectations got a bit lower as well.
Can I ask you, the shellacking they took against Limerick a week and a half ago, whatever it is at this stage, like other teams have taken that same shellacking, you know, as in some of the top teams that we don't quickly dismiss forevermore. They've taken beatings. Like, think of Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final from the 25th minute onwards last year, beating out the gate. For long spells, Kilkenny, especially in the second half, beating out the gate. They beat teams out the gate. It doesn't mean that you're done forevermore.
No, it doesn't. I suppose a lot of it would be the fact that, you know, there was no Cian Lynch and there was no Declan Hannon and there was no Aaron Gallan and there was, you know what I mean, like that they were missing.
Well, there was no Cian Lynch and, sorry, who was it? There was no Declan Hannon and no Sean Finn last year when Limerick were hammering these other teams.
Fair point. It's just, I suppose, that Limerick were able to put 330 on them without probably some of their best forwards, I suppose, would be worrying, so, you know, to say the least.
Yeah, fair enough. Opportunity for Dublin then? Just I suppose that's it. No, like we've just said, expectations.
The threat is that Micheál Donoghue is going to have 2 years done. I forget what he signed up for at the start, but the threat is that he could have 2 years done, and I suppose that could be that, and we're maybe a little bit none the wiser about where Dublin are. Like I'm not really any the wiser about, you know, how they play exactly, or how, you know, even the makeup of their forward line. Probably a good bit wiser about their defence and that, especially with Crummy starting at 6 the last day, and he was probably thrown into the deep end after in his first game back, probably with Dublin in the guts of about 2 years. But I suppose I'm not really any the wiser about how Dublin play under Micheál Donoghue at the minute, and the threat is that, you know, this season could blend into last season, and I don't know. Like, would he get a third year? Would he want a third year? So the threat is that could all go by pretty quickly, I would say.
Yeah, and Donald Burke is obviously someone I should have been mentioning earlier when I was talking about the spine of the team, because he's brilliant. But also, if you look at the Leinster Championship last year, they played 5 games in it and they lost only 1. Now they drew 2 and they won 2, which is fine. And then last year in the All-Ireland quarter-final, they got shellacked by Clare.
Shellacked is the word of the day.
It sure is. So I suppose, is the threat that basically they'll go through another year having not really laid a glove properly in a big knockout game. And that it'll just feel like another year you come away and you're almost a bit disinterested in the team. As a spectator, obviously I'd have a great interest in Dublin, but like I feel at times other people, they're kind of disinterested in the team because, they're not laying a glove. They're not putting up, they do put up scores at times, but it's just not a glitzy team to watch. And
and the thing about that, Shane, is that I think everybody wants them to be up there, really kind of duking it out with the bigger teams. I think, and like any hurling person I've spoken to, they'd love to see another face at the table, and it's a bit frustrating because you're kind of thinking there's plenty of talent there, but it's just not, they're not able to get there. They're not able to lay a glove on these big teams consistently. Like they can throw it down to Galway and, be up 10 points nearly against Galway. And then obviously it ended up in a draw or whatever. But they can't seem to do that consistently. Like they were wide open against Clare last year in the All-Ireland quarter-final, coming into it in decent form. And I think people just want to see them getting to a level and staying there. We're seeing glimpses, but we're just not seeing enough.
Okay, then we'll move on to Antrim. Strength for Antrim? You'd have to put in some of their league form, even the fact that they lost to Dublin the last day out or a couple of games ago, but they were in a position to win that game, and it was an individual error that cost them. And maybe you could sort of jump onto the weakness straight away and say, is the depth going to be a concern now? The fact that they've had to convert an outfielder into a goalkeeper after losing Ryan Elliott and then losing some of the other Dunloy lads and Neil McManus, that maybe there's going to be a depth issue, maybe a little bit of a leadership issue also, the likes of Keelan Malloy not there too, but that will catch up with them this year. Not sure if I have your audio there, Michael. I seem to have lost him for a second. But just in terms of like Antrim this year, like kicking on from I'm just going to go and find the way their fixtures kind of pan out this year, just to make sure that I've got their sort of run in Leinster. But Michael, I'm just going to go through the way their run in Leinster is going to happen this year. So in round 1, they're away to Kilkenny. Round 2, which is just a week later, they're at home to Wexford. I mean, what an unbelievably tough start that is. Then a couple of weeks after that, they're away to Dublin. And then finally, you're going to have them at home to Carlow. Sorry, they've got Galway as well. And then at home to Carlow the last day out, which everyone would be expecting to be the de facto relegation playoff. Like, it's a really tough run through Leinster.
Yes, but I would think that they would feel that potentially they could get a result in Corrigan against Wexford and against Carlow. Like the last couple of years, like they got a result against Dublin last year, should have won. They should have got a win against Dublin in Corrigan Park this year as well in the league. I'd say Darren Gleeson will have his pen circled around that Wexford game. Like, imagine they were able to get a result. It would leave them in that second game. It would leave themselves in a half decent position going forward, and that's not beyond the realms of possibility either. But you probably would be thinking that it's coming down to that Carlow game. And to be fair, it's a good one and an important one to have at home.
Yeah, and part of the opportunity for them is they went through those 5 Leinster games last year. They lost 3 of the games, fair enough. But even their scoring differential wasn't brutal at the end of it. They were minus 26 after 5 games, losing 3 of them. So they've been through this, whereas Carlow, haven't been through this. So what would be I would see that as part of the opportunity that they have that experience. In terms of threat then?
The threat is that, I would say, given the personnel that they're missing and some of their best players in recent years, the threat will be that, I'd say, something that you mentioned there potentially about weakness, that the depth is not good enough, and also that there's almost like there's an experience deficit there as well. There's a threat for probably a mindset potentially to set in that we're behind the 8 ball before things start here. We're down, you could fill half a page with the players that they're going to be missing this year. There's a threat there that I suppose a negative air could potentially set in, and I suppose that's something Darren Gleeson was trying to prevent against when he made some comments after, I think it was the first game when they were well beaten by Limerick. But that definitely is a threat, that the absence of experience, that there's a threat for them to be potentially bowled over, particularly by the bigger teams, that they just won't have the experience on the field to stem the blood loss and stem the tide when things are going bad. And there's a threat of taking, I would say, a couple of big beatings in Leinster.
Carlow, I think one of the strengths for them this year has to be their form so far. They've won 3 games out of 3. Like, so a weakness then, do they have enough scorers if Martin Kavanagh is kept quiet, or if he gets injured, for example?
I would say they do. In fairness, Chris Nolan can take over free taking duties, and he's capable of hitting 4 or 5 in a game. Paddy Boland, we saw how good he was in the McDonagh final last year. Donagh Murphy is kind of coming through. He's obviously an All-Ireland Colleges winner with Cairns. Like, none of them are going to replace Marty Kavanagh if something happens to him, but they'll all maybe chip in collectively. Throw in John Nolan as well in on top of that too. I think their depth is probably better than it has been, and I think they now have a squad maybe that they haven't had in recent years. Nearly everybody they want on board. Just a matter of, as you said there, it's a matter of trying to keep them all on the pitch and keep them injury free.
Okay. Opportunity for them?
I would say it's something similar to with Dublin. Like, most people are going to probably think that Carlow are going to go straight back down after coming back up. Most people are going to think it's between Carlow and Antrim. The last time they were up, they found it tough enough, but they were very, very competitive in the first game at Galway. I think, wasn't that result against Galway what ultimately ended up signalling Galway's exit from the Leinster Championship on score difference? Yeah, beaten by 6 in Salt Hill. So there's an opportunity potentially to get a result. And like, Wexford and Dublin will have to be on guard against Carlow, and they'll have to be on guard against Antrim as well, because there is a potential for an upset. And Wexford have seen it. They saw it in 2022 when they drew at Westmeath in Cusack Park. They saw it last year when they blew a 17-point lead against Westmeath as well. You can't take these teams for granted, and there is an opportunity there potentially to take a scalp. And if you are able to take a scalp, it would leave Carlow in a hell of a good position going into that final game against Antrim, where, you know, a draw would keep you up. If you have points on the board, you don't necessarily need to win that game.
Yeah, I think confidence as well. Like, look at their start to the championship, away to Galway, who like to pulverize teams who are a little bit off the challengers. We keep talking about that this season. Then if Dublin come to town and get a victory, now that's obviously the opportunity as well. They won't have a sort of an inferiority complex to Dublin. But if they lose that game, and maybe if Dublin hit form at the right time, then your confidence all of a sudden is compromised ahead of your next game, which is welcoming Kilkenny to town. We already saw in the preseason competition, they were very, very poor against Kilkenny. Now, maybe that won't have any relevance come then, but just maybe a confidence thing. Like, can they make sure they get to that stage of the final game, which probably will be that relegation playoff with Antrim, whereby their confidence is intact? And you could obviously say the same for Antrim.
Yeah, and the threat, Shane, is having got up to the Leinster Championship that they go straight back down. And all the good work, would say, that Tom Mullally has done to this point. And they're looking like they're going to be playing Division 1 hurling next year as well, at the minute anyway, flying high at the top of Division 2A. That threat that they would be back down in the McDonagh in 2025. And that's not, like, my own county's in the McDonagh. It's not like that's where we are at the minute. But when you get up, if they can stay there, Antrim have stayed there for a year, and I think it will stand to them potentially in this year's Leinster Championship, and particularly in that Carlow game. But it's crucial for Carlow that they're competitive in Leinster this year, or as competitive as they can be, and that they find a way to stay up somehow. Because even from a morale point of view, you're facing into 2025. Yes, there's a chance of silverware with, you know, been getting back to the Joe McDonagh again, or getting to a final again, but they want to be testing themselves at the highest level. So that's the threat, that they've gone up and that they'll go straight back down. And that's something I'm sure they'll be moving hell and high water to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, Travis Beeler says, opportunity for Carlow. It's probably the best team in their history. Mouse Cavan and Chris Nolan would make any top-tier team. Class players. Carlow public should get behind them. And Richard Hogan says, Carlow competitive against both Galway and Kilkenny the last time they were here. So look, maybe we were sort of putting lower expectations than we should on the Carlow hurling team. It's just some of the things that I've seen so far this year wouldn't ultimately fill me with huge optimism for their year. But it could be like anything, one of these things where they're timing it for the summer, trying to have everyone on the pitch at the right time and give a right rattle at the championship. Because ultimately, like, that's what you're going to be judged on, Michael. If you have a couple of ropey performances in the league, people will get over that.
Yeah, it was more in the Walsh Cup when Kilkenny kind of lay waste to them. Their league has been good so far, to be fair. And I said to you before, Tom Mullally kind of said that they can generally, with the size of their squad and what's available to them, they can generally only target one competition. But I think they've basically nearly everybody in the county that they want available to them. So they'll be hoping that they can carry league form into championship. I don't think we're being unrealistic though. Like, themselves and Antrim are going to be under pressure. It's going to be, you'd imagine it's going to be an either or to see who's relegated. But listen, we probably had the same conversation last year with putting Westmeath and Antrim into that conversation, and Wexford nearly ended up getting relegated. So you never know.